Well, today is an unusual day. I'm going to be just giving you a little overview of a book that we're coming out with, and I know Carolyn Price is excited about this because it's amazing, this process that led to it. It was actually when I was in the National Gallery of Art, and I was taking, doing various photos. And as my custom is, I take the photo of the image, what it is, and then I can know what it is I'm looking at. You see, it's pretty smart. It works for me pretty well. So, I know what this is now, and then the next picture is, in fact, the thing. You see, and then I came across something that was quite surprising after this painting. We went into another room, a special room. This was in July of 2018, so it was 4 years ago. And I was inspired when I saw, so here is the first painting, The Voyage of Life and Childhood. And when I saw this painting, and it was in a sort of an octagonal kind of a room, they were at opposites of one another in the corners of the room. And it was the last thing we were going to do. In fact, we were not going to go at all to that room. We were out of time. We'd gone through the whole museum. We were worn out. And then, well, let's just try this one room. It was the best part of the whole day. Because there I saw these amazing paintings. This is the first one that we have, and it's with Cole's own description of this material that he wrote in 1840. And it was The Voyage of Life, and a very large painting. And there to see it for the first time was quite an experience for me, because this deals with the youth and then childhood, and then youth follows that, as you can see here. And then the third painting was manhood, and I took that photo there. And then the fourth painting was old age, and we have that. And that inspired something for me, kind of triggered something for me. And not long after that, I did a short teaching series on the Voyage of Life in this class. And one thing led to another, and it kind of developed a life of its own. So the upshot was that eventually we came up with a book. And this book here, The Angel and the Voyager. And so this is what Thomas Cole's Voyage of Life and Course of Empire paintings tell us about the meaning of life. So what I'm seeking to do here is to use something along this line. Just describe it in an email I sent out to some friends. I said, beauty is a Trojan horse for goodness and truth. Now stop and think about that. It really gets you past. And now encounter with beauty and story speaks to the heart and lowers the defenses of the watching dragons of critical objections. You get the idea there? A lot of people, it speaks to the heart, and as a result, they cannot deny what they're seeing. So I'm now using beauty as my entry point to bringing to people to goodness and truth. And it reminds me of this whole concept here, if I go for just a moment and show you what I mean by that. If I look at beauty and as a connector, you see, beauty connects mystery with goodness and truth. And that's a very profound concept for us to consider. And that is why of late I've been using beauty in the natural world as my force multiplier for worship, because I'm seeing the visible, and the visible points beyond itself to ineffable mysteries that transcend my imagination, my comprehension. And in fact, with technology and science now, in the last 50 years especially, the ramp up of our knowledge of the macrocosm, now with the Webb telescope, for example, and on the microcosm, with any number of techniques that we can use to see the structures of the cell and further down, and also the midicosm, anything you choose to look at, whether it's a leaf, a tree, you can look at a plant, you could, let alone an insect or a bird, and you're immersed in mystery. And so this mystery points me to beauty and then to goodness, to goodness and truth. The beauty connects me with that. And so I was really struck by that, and it struck my heart as I was looking at these paintings. What does this tell me about my life? And that's what Cole is trying to help us do as well. And so I tried to explore that a little bit in our time together, a couple of years ago, I guess it was. And one thing led to another and evolved into this, and suddenly it became a book. So it's like this, The Angel and the Voyager. And so it's what these books, they tell us about the meaning of life. And the whole concept of what life is about. It's a beautiful coffee table book, and it's 9 by 11, and it'll be a book that I'm hoping to, you know what my real goal is? My goal would be to get this in the bookstore at the National Gallery of Art. Wouldn't that be a fun thing? Because I'm using, this is a gospel tract is what it is, but it's more subtle than that, you see. It brings you through that. I'll show you what I mean. Because here, the first chapter is why are we here and where we're going? And we talk about Thomas Cole, the moralist, and the autodidact. You know what an autodidact is? One who teaches himself. And effectively, he's trained himself. He was not really in a formal school as such, but he was a genius at just coming together with things. And his paintings became increasingly allegorical as time went on, and increasingly spiritual as well, because although he was connected with the original kind of the Hudson River school is associated with him, you see, and others, the transcendentalists like Ralph Waldo Emerson and Henry Thoreau, and the others of this sort were much more into a transcendental notion, much more of perhaps either the idea of kind of a pantheism or a panentheism. In some cases, though, it was just a kind of just a flat-out humanism. But in any case, Cole, although he was connected in some respects with those people in his paintings or associated with that, he became much more theistic as his work went on. He became much less deistic and much more theistic as time went on. And you can actually do a study of how he himself changed in his own short journey of life, so that he had a very short life indeed. In fact, I ran into a wonderful article about the studio that they're reconstructing, that they reconstructed that he has in the Hudson River. And it was unlike any studio in America at that time. It was like a European studio. The guy was amazing. And he prepared this, and this was in 1847, so he's at the peak of his powers, of his prowess, of his abilities. And then he gets pleurisy and dies within a few days. And it really struck me hard, this concept. And I've been thinking about it ever since when I read about this, because I had wondered, what would it be like if this man had another 30 years, you see? Instead of dying at 47, he would have been 77. Guess what? That's what I am. And then it made me think of what would have happened for me if I had died in 1992, you see? And the interesting thing, what difference it makes, and what difference your life would make. What would be different? Remember the film It's a Wonderful Life? And George Bailey gets an opportunity to see how his life is such that things would have been different if he weren't there. Now, it's an interesting concept. What would it have been like if you weren't there? But we all make a big difference, and Cole's preparation for this, and I want to show you just a few of his paintings that relate to this later part in his life, where he was heading, are intriguing and evocative, and invite me to see the basic questions of life, because he was more than a painter. He was a kind of a philosopher. He was a person who wanted to take the natural world and the natural beauty and to use it as a vehicle by which he could amplify the human condition as an expression of where we all are. So why are we here? And where are we going? And then we have a timeline of Cole's career. And then the second chapter is going to be memento mori. You know what that means? Remember you're going to die, basically, and the cycles of life. And so his paintings dealt a good deal with these things. The skull symbolism, we're going to talk about Celtic crosses. I want to say a word about memento mori in music and in poetry, and 3 approaches to the dilemma of mortality. One is to resign to futility. Another is immortality through art, and the third is hoping in eternity. And even in poetry, you see the radical choices, the differences that are made. Then a word about the cycles of life itself, of birth, of growth, decay, and death, and Cole's faith in art. So it's, by the way, the way it lays out in a 2-page layout will be like that, you see. So the spreads will be like that. I love this work. This is really creative design. I mean, just that number 1. is a work of wonder. And this, of course, is the painting that really first struck me, where it is an angel, and there is the baby, the infancy, you see. And so, and all that implies with the hour, the hourglass in front of him there, and all these other components that it imply so many things for us. But in any case, as I work my way through his work then, and consider here are his paintings in chronological sequence, a sequence of that. Kind of interesting to work your way through the work of an artist of any sort, or a director, or a poet, and what you discover is a development in their own thinking and so forth. But going back to where we were before, I wanted just to say then, so I'm going to move from there into the next component where we compare two great collections of paintings he did. One was this series I just mentioned, The Voyage of Life, and then he also did a series called The Course of Empire, and he did this in Europe. And it's fascinating to compare the two, and you see that they actually do fit together. So it's kind of fascinating if I'd have to try to show you what they look like at The Course of Empire. Let me just run it ahead real fast and show you that we do a contrast between, well, we look at the angel, at death itself, and then from there we move on to these two paintings. And so you have the Voyage of Life and Childhood, and then compare it with two paintings in The Course of Empire. And it uses an empire because you see an individual. We have our birth, we have our growth, we have our decay, we have our death. And we certainly know that that's true of every year. It's obvious when you go from the birth of spring and then the growth that we have in the summer, and then beginning the diminishment of the fall, and then the winter, and then the cycle begins again. And so in that process, where do we fit in? But that's true not only of a year, but it's true of course, of a life. Third, it's true of a nation. And fourth, it's true of a civilization. And that's what he's picking up here, the idea of a whole civilization of its own morbidity, of decrepitude, as it moves from a pristine state into desolation. And so it's an intriguing concept, isn't it, of how he did something that had not seen done in that kind of with clarity before. So we compare those two series. And then the fourth chapter is The Ocean of Eternity, where we have various present-day perspectives. And I use even film and how we trade the temporal for the eternal. And then the story of redemption told through 4 words, and then the solution to the dilemma of mortality. So who knows if we could ever get this thing into the museums. It would be a lovely thing to do indeed. But I'm just going to make a few comments about this initial material here, just to give you an idea of where we're going here. So this book is coming out in a month, maybe 2 months max. So we should have it. I'm hoping we're going to have it by September, and we're very excited about it. And it's a book I'm planning to do. I want to reduce all these talks into a one-part talk, you see, where I can summarize the whole thing in one. And then once we have the books themselves, do a special event here in Atlanta and introduce it, and then let people purchase it. Be great Christmas presents, you see, because it's the thing about it, the aesthetics of the thing is such that it needs to be beautiful. And that's why I go back to what I was saying in this email here. An encounter with beauty and story speaks to the heart and lowers the defenses of the watching dragons of critical objections. The Angel and the Voyager was designed with this in mind because it is a beautiful book about a richly aesthetic portrayal of our brief voyage on the river of earthly life. The beauty points to the goodness and truth of the gospel, the good news that embeds this life in a living hope that will not disappoint. And so, I find myself more and more desiring to pursue a story-driven amplification of imagination that will winsomely compel people to long for more. Let me say that again, because that's really what I'm shooting for more now than ever before. A story-driven amplification of imagination. People's imaginations have been degenerated by television and so forth. Their imaginative lives have been diminished into fantasy instead of true imagination and so forth. But here, a story-driven, because we're all in a story. We're in a narrative. And he himself, we look at his narrative of life, we compare it with our narrative of life. Oh, did I forget to mention the fifth category in which the cycle recurs? Daily. So it's not just annually and a whole life and a nation and a civilization every day. You've heard me do this before. I always love to do it. That this morning you woke up. It's like a resurrection, as it were, from the dead. Sleep is a kind of an image of death. And then you begin to, it takes you a while, your birth, as it were, and then your growth. Maybe some more caffeine required than others, but eventually you reach a point of your energy is up. And then you begin to move on, and then maybe it'll flag a little bit, but you may get a second wind. But eventually it's going to get you, and the decay will set in. And then this very night, then you will go to your burial chamber. Remember how I like to put that? You're basically going to go to a burial chamber, and you are going to put on your grave clothes. You see, your PJs, whatever you wear when you go to sleep. And then in your grave clothes, you basically you go and you turn off the light, and you lay yourself on your bier, and then you pull your shroud over your head. And then you go into this death-like state that's called sleep. It's a euphemism of death, those who sleep. And then awake, sleeper, and arise from the dead, and Christ will shine on you. And so in the morning, it's another resurrection. That's why I say that every day has enough trouble of its own. Oh, I didn't make that up, did I? Every day has enough trouble of its own. And so you have to live in such a daily manner that every day is your whole life. That's all you have. And that's what I think we need to do. And Cole's work is a reminder of just that. So he raises the fundamental questions through art of why are we here? And the idea of powerfully portraying the universality of our time on earth is what he seeks to do. Like the movement of the clouds, though, life passes slowly enough that you don't quite see it. If you have to stare at them and begin to see the movement, your day is that way as well, you see. Every day, it slips by, and your plans will never be the same as what actually comes out of it. So we have all these processes we go on through, and here's an image of Cole from the Matthew Brady studio in 1845. And this is also in the Natural Portrait Gallery. But he was as I say, was influenced by European Romanticism and also American expansionism. He was in an intriguing time in the nation's history. He was born in 1801 in Lancashire in England, and then he was raised in Steubenville, Ohio, largely self-tutored and so forth. But you can see it's very profoundly affected by these people. And some of the fellow painters like Frederick Edwin Church and Albert Bierstadt and Asher Brown Durand are these great painters, as they say, the Hudson River School, because they appreciated nature, but all of them had this sense of death, this sense of an imminence of the whole idea of manifest destiny. And what does that do to the natural world? And even at that time, the scenes seem very pristine, but there's already an intimation in these landscapes of things that are to come. So here's just a timeline of his work. And as I look at some of his earliest work, it's always very, very richly embedded in the natural world. And you see people, but they already are now breaking up the land and so forth. And so you have the connectedness with nature, but at the same time, there's something that is going to be diminished. So wonderful images that we have here, landscape with Indian. It's kind of it's the idea of a more pristine world, you see. And so a time when the civilization and all of its implications did not completely impose themselves. Here's a landscape with figures. It's a scene from The Last of the Mohegans, James Fenimore Cooper, who loved, as you're going to see, the work of Cole. And so beautiful workmanship indeed. I just love some of these images. Here's Autumn in the Catskills. And so just a romantic imagery there, just an image here of an Indian. Again, beautiful landscape work. But his paintings began to get more focused on the human drama and the concept of how that affects our own journey. This is an example of that. And this is called Expulsion, Moon and Firelight. And in this painting of Expulsion, what do you see here? Well, over here you see is Eden. You see, it's a symbol. And it's almost, he uses in a certain way of the loss of Eden with the loss of nature as well, with the civilizations that kill away the Eden, the Edenic imagery here. But there's a fire that seems to separate here, and then there's this bridge here, and there's this expulsion where they are cast out of the garden, you see. So this is the picture here. So you can hardly see the figures there. But it's even here, there's an image, there's a kind of a cruciform pattern that takes place that you can observe. You see here. Let me do it differently. Here, maybe this color. So you can see here, it'd be better if I did it that way. So you can see this vertical image here and this horizontal like that. And so this imagery of the cross is I think, a part of what he is about. But the darkness and the despair of a world that's fallen here, and the movement away from an Edenic and pristine environment. You can see this, so here's an image of the Garden of Eden as he would see it here. So again, no works of men. It's just a natural thing. I have to tell you, when I'm driving, I don't look at the works of men. I look at the works of God. Even when I'm waiting at a traffic light, I was looking at some lantana, just studying those things. Why should I worry about all these other things? Look at the beauty that you're immersed in. And we still have those wonderful things that are seen here. But here's another image you see of Eden. And so again, there's an expulsion that takes place. And they're kept, you see them, they're the figures here. Adam and Eve here, and they're now expelled from the garden into that parallel place where it's a darkness and degradation and the loss of the beauty of God. There's this whole idea in motifs in his paintings. For example, this deals with the flood, and so with the Noahic flood, if you look closely, you'll see here is the ark, and there's the dove, you see. So if you look at this, but it's more than just that. It's an allegorical kind of a painting, because you can see in the foreground as well, there's a skull here. So it's like the removal of all these things that were kind of the flood, cleaned up everything, as it were, and made a thing new. Some people related this and seemed to the revolution and this idea of getting away from the expulsion from that, but there are many images that you have here. So that this whole idea, a lone skull suggests that the world has been washed clean of human folly. At the center of the painting, bathed in light, a dove flies toward land as the ark floats on the calm waters, ready to usher in a new and more enlightened era in America. Well, you have to be careful. You don't want to overdo these things here. But one of the things I really like is his work with clouds and biblical themes and motifs, such as the angel appearing to the shepherds here. And bursts of heavenly light take place. And so I'll give you a picture of this here. So the painting, now you have to remember there's a 2-page spread, remember? And so in this 2-page spread, but the problem then is for me to find where I foolishly left off. And so, but I do it this way. Let's go back here. Here. Yes, you can see. Gosh, it's further back than I thought. We're never going to get down. So this is that painting. You see that? So it spills over in an artistic way into the other component there. But you're looking at the imagery here of use of light and darkness, biblical motifs, and becomes suggestive of the human condition. Even if you looked at these 3 shepherds, that the one is in terror, one response. One is not utterly overwhelmed, but there's a more mature response of the old, you see here, where he actually sees this and has a greater apprehension of what this announcement is to be. And there in the distance, of course, is the star. So he does a lot of these themes, and it becomes evident if you look at his life as well, that as his life continues to go along, that he had some greater encounter with the Lord that I see became evident and becomes evident in his work as well. The Course of Empire has this motif of a savage state, and then it develops and so forth. But in 5 paintings, you can see this one thing that's consistent, another metaphor that he uses here. There's this boulder that's precariously perched on the top. And it's an image, isn't it, of the idea of the dangers of urban expansion in America. But a boulder balanced on the cliff in the distance remains unchanged. It's constantly serving as a reminder of nature's permanence, even while its precarious position points to the transience of men. So all 5 of the paintings in this series have that in there. It's ingenious. I mean, what he's done, creative work. So these are images. I'll allude to them soon. But remarkable pictures. Images. Not only do I consider, this is James Fenimore Cooper writing about the Course of Empire, the work of highest genius this country has ever produced, but I esteem it as one of the noblest works of art that has ever been wrought. Now, the idea that this really struck people and deeply with a sense of the beauty of the Lord and what he's done. Even a lot of symbolism, even here, if you look in this imagery here from this painting of, again, inspired by, it's the view from Mount Hollyhock on Northampton, the oxbow. And what's fascinating here is that you actually have Hebrew letters spelling out Noah and Shaddai. You have to look for them, but they're you see that? So that would be the Noah here, like here, you see, like what we have to use a thinner thing like that, and do that. So the Hebrews letters would be here, and it's an image then again of the works of men. This I think is Cole himself as the artist who's doing the painting. So again. You learn a lot about his character and his journey of life, and he did this 4-part painting series, and then it did a different version of it later on, of the Voyage of Life, in which you have, in childhood, he enters a fertile world as a babe, full of innocent wonder. In youth, he charges ahead with confidence and ambition. In manhood, he cries out for deliverance against the turbulent waters of middle age. And in old age, he sails peacefully toward his eternal home at the end of his days. So it's, again, a process of how he himself is transmuted by his experiences in this world. So you begin to see, let me just, should we are, okay, look at my timing here. So in childhood, then he can't even see, the babe can't see the angel behind him who has the rudder, and the hourglass is seeing the amount of time he's been given. And then in the youth, you see he's not looking at. He never sees him until the last time. The angel bids him off, but he's got his hand in the rudder. There's this hourglass, and he's looking ahead at his own visions of what he wants to see. Not being aware, however, in the painting that something is ominous here. What he supposes what he's looking at. He looks up in that direction. What does he see? These noble fantasies and images of what he wants to be. What he doesn't grasp, however, is that the river takes a turn and goes that way. You see, and it continues to go that way, and goes that way, and then goes out there. So what he doesn't plan, this is what he did not plan. He did not plan on that his life would not go in the direction he wanted. And so by the time he gets into his middle ages, that's where he ends up. And he's in despair, and for the first time he can see death in the distance, that's symbolized by the ocean. And then from there, he cries out to God, and you can see again the angel behind him he does not yet see. And then when he's an old man, he for the first time sees the image. Also, you'll notice that there's no rudder left, there's no hourglass left, it's all gone. And what he sees, though, for the first time is home. And so there's even an image of others that are calling him, and even further up in the distance, more up in the distance, you see like that. So it's a fascinating use of painting in an allegorical way. And he did other paintings subsequent to that. This is what's called the picnic. It's funny how they spelled it, a picnic party. Picnic. That's where that idea of our picnic. Painted 4 years after the second Voyage of Life, because he did one series, but then he did it in Europe, and that's the one that we are using here. And this whole idea of a picnic, and how, again, there's a connection, and there's a happiness in the beauty of the natural world, but what do you see in the foreground right there? So immediately you see something to come. Things are coming. And if that was ominous in the 1840s, you see, what do you think it was like then by the 1890s and now by the 1990s? And you can begin to realize it's all changed. It's radically different. It's almost like a prophetic picture there. There's a sadness. Near the end of his life, though, he was working on some other paintings, and one was a painting series that he was going to be calling the Study for Two Youths Enter Upon a Pilgrimage. And so it was really the cross in the world. And so in this painting, it's much more of an allegorical painting near the end of his life, where it's being much more explicit. And the father is sending the two sons off. Now he's pointing off in this direction here. And that's the way he should be going, but the other guy's he's going to go the other way. And again, it's the options, the choices that one makes between one course of action and another. And if you look at the later on that series, so the youth who goes toward the world and follows its pursuits, again, there's his fantasy in front of him. Everything's looking welcoming and pristine, but on the other hand, what he ends up seeing is going to be ending up there. He ends up in degradation, because what appeared to be very, very appealing turns out to be something that was actually the path that led to death. Whereas by contrast, the one who pursues what appears to be the road of self-denial, instead of the road of the world, it's the road of the word. He ends up here, and what does he see? Angels welcoming him again, and you see angels all along here, and up to this imagery here. I noticed that the cross became a bigger figure in his later years than it was in his earlier years, which again suggests that he's no longer like Thoreau and Emerson and the transcendentalists, but he's much more clear about a cruciform vision about life is about the cross. And you see this as well in another one of his paintings here. So go here. But the whole idea of the cross and what that looks like, to me, is a very critical theme for his later journey in life itself. So here again, the cross. So what would it have been like if he had been able to complete this new series? You see, we have 5 studies. So what he would do is he would do his studies and then layer them and so forth. And we never got to see what it would have been like. And it makes me think about that idea of a journey of life. Here's a man whose own spiritual journey continued to grow as he matured. He's at the peak of his prowess and his powers, and it makes me think of certain people who are at the height of their ability and they're gone, and I don't understand it. I think of four composers pop into my mind. One is Henry Purcell. Another one is Frederick Chopin. Another one is George Gershwin. And another one is Mozart. And all 4 of these died about 35, 36 years old. Then you do a thought experiment. What would it have been like with these great? Because all 4 of them, their work was getting better and better, not worse. So I imagine, and only they had the voice to create these sounds that no one else could do. When you hear the oeuvre of Chopin, you know who you're hearing. And he had a genius and a capacity in those very few years to do so much. I'm overwhelmed by that. And then my thought experiment is, what would it be like if he had another 30 years, you see? That's what I often think about. And for my own application, I think about how precious the present is, that I don't have much time. And so my own life journey here, I've been granted more time by far than these great geniuses. And I've been given a time, and so all of us, as you know, as I put it, are living on borrowed time, aren't we? And we have unfinished business while we're still alive. And so I must then really use the things of this day, of this life, of this understanding. And I use this series as well as a kind of a means by which I'm hoping to bring people into a sense through beauty that there's more in life. It forces people to raise the fundamental questions of what life is about. Because if I can get people to do that, I think it would make an enormous amount of difference. And so when I think about the four soils, for example, the seed that went beside the road, the rocky ground, among the thorns, and the good soil. And it's really a diminishment, isn't it, as it goes by. I pitched my message to the fourth soil. That's why I'll never be that popular, you see. And I don't intend to be popular. My intention is to reach to the people that God wants me to call, and I feel led in that way. The same, there's a parallel here with knowledge, understanding, experience, and application. You see, that gets narrower as you go by as well. You can have you can know the book of Job, perhaps you can understand some of its themes. You can have a Job-like experience, but until you have the application and realizing, stop asking me why. You'll never understand it. Instead, trust me. You'll never understand me. Look at my created order. I'm not going to answer your silly questions. Even if I did, they would raise another question. It would go on ad infinitum. You'll never get me. But you can trust me, and that's the theme. Or another way of looking at it, beauty, wonder, curiosity, and submission. Same here. That I want to expose people to beauty, but not all will wonder. That's the interesting thing. Not all will wonder about what they see. They see it, oh, that's nice. And then of that number, smaller yet will be those who are curious to say why. And the smallest of all will be the ones who submit to the message to say that I am now enveloped in a mystery. And the mystery of the one who made all things is the one who holds all things together. And I can submit to that. And only then can I find my true home. I think that's where Cole was moving as well in his own life, that he had this sense of this longing, this cruciform desire. And it's impossible to know. We'll have to chat with him in the Father's house. And I look forward to a long and interesting chat of what might have been. What do you think he'll be creating then? What kind of artwork will you be doing? What things will you create? What skills will you develop? What possibilities, what potentials do you have? And you know you all have so many more than you'll ever be able to get in this brief few decades in this world. But it's a hint of home, isn't it? That whether you're given few years or more years, use it wisely, use it well, and don't waste a day, don't waste an hour, don't waste a minute, because everything matters. And so live your life fully in the presence of God and ask him, as Cole, I think, was seeking to do near the end of his days, what is the course of life? And choose you the way of life. Not this way or that way, but this is the way. The way that appears to be that of abundance is a way that leads to deadness at the end. The way that appears to be sacrificial actually is the way of life itself. It's the upside values of the kingdom of God. And if we pursue him and his desires, then and only then do we find what we've always been looking for. You never find satisfaction by looking for it, do you? It's always the overflow, the byproduct of the pursuit of God, the one thing most needful. Lord, we thank you that you've called us to be people of praise, and we thank you for servants of yours like Thomas Cole who invite us to see more and to have a better view, a better vision of this world, your world, and the world in which we're immersed as well, to ask ourselves those questions of why are we here? Where do we come from? Where are we going? Who are we? As you define us, and we discover in your definition, as we find you, we find ourselves. We thank you in Jesus' name. Amen.